Hey there. So
Hey
we
there.
can get the seller to make repairs sometimes for the buyer when there's no option time frame due to the buyer at all.
It's not out of the question.
So let's kind of discuss that here. That's Shana Acquisto, luxury real estate broker, and I'm Mike. And today we're going to kind of
Also,
go over
luxury
that.
real estate broker.
Yeah.
Just saying.
All righty. So what we're going to talk about is that you can just ask for it, right?
Just ask.
Be in control, and sometimes the power is shifted to you. So let's kind of think about that. The power does shift to the buyer the moment the contract is executed, just a little bit, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And now all of a sudden the seller is talking to one buyer, not to like all of these buyers. And they can put a little pressure by putting a backup offer.
Correct.
But Shauna, kind of let's discuss this.
So I would first like to give a little shout out to Katy because she has been working with a buyer that is in a price point that is extremely competitive and demanding. And she has been driving all over the place, and she, that's one thing. Driving all over, putting in multiple offers, and have lost several properties due to multiple offers. So she worked very hard, got this buyer accepted, and they're under contract. No option period. Everything is waived. Okay. And this buyer went ahead and had his home inspection, which he is, he can do that. And when it came up, he's like, oh, I've given all my money for this and extra for appraisal and all this. And I really would like some money for repairs. So it was like, well, it's really unlikely that the seller's going to do this, right? But why not ask? Why not ask? Just go for it. So they did, and lo and behold, the seller came back and said yes. So a couple of things that we talked through when doing this is don't just instantly think no, right? Remember who you're working for. You are an advocate, and you're working for your buyer. So at that time, you're under contract. The seller's kind of like in a holding pattern. They can't do anything, right? So you kind of, I don't want to use the term have them over a barrel, but the power has shifted to now you're in control. And, the buyer could walk away and they probably have a backup offer. But that takes time, and there's a process, and it's just time is ticking, right? So wouldn't it be better to come in and maybe ask for something, and from a seller's standpoint, say yes to avoid having to start back over, go through this whole exercise again? I would say yes. So don't be afraid to ask. I think sometimes that we're in these positions and we're nervous too. Like, oh gosh, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I don't want to upset anybody. But you know what? Do your job. Take a deep breath, calm down, and remember who you work for. So in this case, Katy asked for it, and it wasn't it wasn't like they were asking for $10,000. It was a small amount, but it was a big amount to the client, and it meant a whole lot to him. So she presented it in a way that said, you know what, I know we have no option period, and I know this isn't likely, but you know what, this happened. And, my seller could really walk away, and he would lose his earnest money. And if we look at this, that might be worth it to him because this is really important. So she presented it, they accepted. This buyer is beyond happy. So great job, Katy. You did a great job with this. And, it just kind of teaches us all that asking is free. Just ask and present it in a way that doesn't upset them. Just be good about it. Be careful. So shout out to Katy, everybody.
Very good. And we all hear sometimes these different phrases like asking is free, right?
My dad used to tell me that.
And
as
it's
a
not
kid.
over till you hear no. Those are always options as well.
Maybe
right?
a second or third no.
Yeah, you hear those things. And nice job, Katy.
Yes.
We do appreciate it. Mm-hmm. And, the
I
power...
love these wins because she was, you get beat down when you keep trying to, keep your client motivated to keep going through this hard process. So
Now, the option time frame is not a time to renegotiate the contract.
no,
That's a careful thing that
and
we have to
never
look at.
assume that someone will.
Correct. And in this particular case, they're just like, hey, this is better off and easier for us to do than do the alternative. And maybe the person on the other side, it's not, every person's different. Yeah. And sometimes there's emotion, and they're like, hey, well, the person did pay this for the house, and, they kind of have a point, and, right? And they're like, all right, fine, let's do that. And, maybe they're like, we should have been doing this all along the way, and it was negligence, and I shouldn't have put that off, and there is deferred maintenance, and
yeah,
they just say,
this
like,
is something
okay,
we couldn't
fine.
have seen, and so great job.
There you go. Try it out for your buyer clients, and if you are a listing agent, be aware, right? And just understand what it is, and say, carefully balance it. Is it worth it to go all the way back and start over, or just to have your sellers say yes to this?
Yes, and carefully balance how you approach asking the seller. You have to be careful with that too. So it's a careful balance. You guys can do it.
Listing agents, you kind of have some liability here, specifically at the front door related to the key. That's luxury real estate broker Shana Acquisto. I'm Mike Acquisto. We're going to tell you all about that right now.
Yes.
So who has this key? Who's responsible for the home?
Yeah.
Are you prepared for this craziness?
Yeah.
Is this a frat house? You go to some of these, you go to some of these listings, and people are walking in and they're like all over the place. You've reported people throwing things all over, people sitting and eating at the kitchen table, like bringing food with them. They're like, hey, I'm just going in, right? Not setting appointments, all these different things.
Yeah.
It's a bit nuts.
Yeah.
And they kind of have this mentality of, last person out, turn the lights off. And it's like, well, that's not how it is. We have a door, and there's a key, and there's a lockbox on it. And there's some liability there.
There is.
Shauna, can you kind of walk us through this?
So when you take a listing, and we're talking about it from a listing agent standpoint, who gives you that key and access to their home? Seller gives it to you, the listing agent. So you have to be in control of that key, the key. Mm-hmm. And so it's really difficult unless you're there all the time. What are you going to do, right? You can't possibly manage that whole showing process and be there every time, most likely.
Well, now I report back to you that in this scenario here where we're going through all these multiple offers, right? Is it maybe important that you are there? If all these things are going on, if you start hearing reports of like a ton of people here and I have 50 showings today, I don't know. Is that something that you as a listing agent or your listing assistant should kind of be there?
Yeah.
The seller's taken some, they trusted in you.
And I think we're going to hear this more. Words getting out that, I don't want 100 people coming through my home, right?
Yeah.
So, ideally you have to talk with your seller, but set it up to where you plan for them to be gone for a period of time over a long weekend. And then you man the crazy.
Or woman.
Right? Or woman. Woman the crazy, man the crazy, whatever. But you say, hey, showing's going to start this day. I'm going to have it open, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Bring your buyers in at that time, and that's that. And then, have a plan. What I do suggest is we've talked about it last week, is put an offer instructions in place and kind of outline. So if anything ever happens, you have outlined and given instructions on how you want this to play out, okay? You're responsible to the seller. He's going to ask you the questions. So, we all know from a buyer's standpoint, when you go in, you are, whoever is holding that key at the time is responsible.
And then there's a ton of things. So that's what we're really discussing here. All of a sudden, now if you transfer the situation and you become the showing agent, you take this key out, right? And you check it out.
Yeah.
And it timestamps like, hey, Shauna just took this key out of this box.
Yeah.
And now I have this key in my hand. And if you don't put it back in and like close it and seal it, it doesn't say that you checked out.
You were the last person in. And that's on record.
If things happen within the home when you're there, right? So you can't just be giving this key to somebody else and not having them check it in or out. You can't be letting other people in the home. You can't be like eating food at the kitchen table. right? You can't just have random people like, oh, I was just driving down the road and I saw that there's a listing here. I'm going in as just a random person. Like, these are things that are like, no.
Yeah, it could be somebody, I did have a person show up at one of our listings, and he was a teenager, wanted to come in just to see the home on a skateboard. And if we didn't have the door locked, he would have just come right in. So, it's crazy. Another thing we talked about from the listing agent standpoint, if you're not going to be there and you are going to have showings, put the instructions in, one person at a time, and that's really difficult. If you are going to allow overlapping appointments, then put the instructions in there. We're going to allow for it, but make sure you do not pass the key off, that you put it back in the lockbox, and the next agent has to take it out, right? So it's on record. And a lot of people are going to get frustrated. They're busy. They're running frantically from one property to the next. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. If they yell at you, they get upset, whatever, say, you know what? I don't want to get in trouble with MLS. That's our MLS rule that we have to do it that way. So you can pass it off to the next person, but I'm not doing that. And it's fine. It's okay.
Yes. So there's a ton of liability associated with that front door key.
Oh, this is what I was going to say. So take that box, and maybe you don't put it on your front door. Maybe you hide it somewhere. Okay? So someone can't just come up and go into the home and access it without an appointment, and then worry about saying, sorry, I called showing time. They didn't tell you. We're seeing that a lot. So they're doing this and then dealing with the fallout afterwards. So maybe if you put that key somewhere else, hide it to the side of the home on a water spigot or something. So it's just not easily available for someone to access. They have to go through showing time, and then you have some instructions in there.
Okay, very good. It's
Be
important.
careful,
It's
please.
very, very important. Just kind of make note. There is liability here.
And at the end of the day, if your seller says, I want all the lights off, which we can understand that, maybe they are gone for the weekend, then maybe you need to go back over and double check it at the end to make sure all the doors are shut, the lights are off, and the home is okay until the
But maybe
following
the
day.
expectation of a listing agent going back through and turning every single light off after they're done is not logical at this point. And instead, you would take on that liability to go back and turn it off at the end of the day,
Correct.
knowing that there's going to be a bunch of showings. If you expect to have 50 showings in one day, how could you possibly ask the people to go on and turn on every light and turn it off and like whatever that is? That's a lot of motion. And maybe it just rather stays on from showing to showing, and you make that note in there as well.
Sure.
Okay?
Good.
Thank you.
It's a great, great day. It's a good day. Get up. Can't you see the sun shining? I woke up and I rolled out of bed. Got dressed and I left at 10. Check my nails, looking good. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.